Welcome, everybody. We will be with you in 10 minutes. So we shall start around 1 o'clock to grab a cup of tea, and we'll be with you in 10 minutes for our webinar. Thanks a lot. Bye. Welcome everybody. I'm just going to give it a couple minutes just for the last few stragglers of trying to log in and get to us. So bear with us a second, 2 more minutes, and then we will get started. Thanks a lot. Good afternoon, everybody. Hi, welcome to yet another webinar from the National Youth Agency on our guidance for COVID-19. My name is Lee Middleton. I'm Chief Executive of the NYA, and it is my pleasure to guide you through this afternoon. I am joined by my team. We've got the lovely Abby McLatchy, our Director of Youth Work, in the background. Abby will be collating, as usual, all the questions that you might have, and once I've done the presentation, we will quickly move on to a Q&A, and Abby will put those questions to us. So in the chat section of YouTube, you can put in your comments, you can say hello to each other, but if there are any specific questions you would like to ask, or things you're worried about, or areas that we can help you with, related to COVID-19 guidance, please put them in the chats, and Abby is there monitoring it, and she'll pull those out, and we'll do our best. I'm not Chris Whitty, I'm not a doctor, I can't answer maybe some of the scientific questions, but we will certainly do our best, and we've been in touch with the government for the last day or two, and we'll tell you what we know, and we'll all work through this. I've got a few slides that I'm going to talk you through, and then we will go on to that Q&A. A final few thanks to our team at the NYA, who've been amazing in this whole process. In the background we've got Laura. Normally we've got Alex, but today we've got Laura who's steering us, so thank you to Laura. And on Saturday we got as much notice as you did. I was saying, I kind of joke that when the BBC app pops up saying the Prime Minister is going to talk at 4 o'clock, we all swung into action and everyone was poised ready. So we've reacted to this as quick as we can, and we'll talk you through it. So let me get this sorted out. There we go. Right. So as we always do with our webinars, just a few things just to bring you up to speed on. It's really important that you keep up to date with all the guidance and all the information from the NYA. We do an awful lot more than guidance, so if there's other areas of our work that are of interest to you, please have a look at our website, get involved. But the one thing you really must do is go onto the NYA network and register. So if you go to that link there, nya.org.uk/register, you can sign up to the NYA essentially. It's a free service, it doesn't cost you anything, we don't spam you, but we will drop into your inbox the minute anything changes, a newsletter and an update, and we'll keep you up to date with other things that we're doing. You can follow us on all the social media channels, and whilst you're on YouTube, please go and give us a thumbs up if you think this is good, and subscribe to our YouTube channel. That way you'll always get the latest information. So, and I think if you click the bell icon, they say you'll also get alerted for when we do further webinars. We've got one more of these booked, which we're going to do early in the new year, and I'll talk about that at the end of the day. You can also follow us on Twitter, and there's the hashtags and details for Abby and I, if you want to follow us as well. We say this every time, but if your organisation is part of a national association, so the Girl Guides, the Army Cadets, the Sea Cadets, as we've got a few of them on the screen, they may also publish additional information to support you, and they are there to help you. So do go and have a look at the websites or the pages that they've created for you. We work very closely with these organisations. We've not been able to do that quite as we might normally do this time round. It's Christmas and a lot of people are on leave, but the rules and regulations that we're putting in place should be fairly familiar and hopefully easy to adopt, but they are there to help you. Please pay close attention to your national association. again, we say this every time, but the NYA's jurisdiction is England only. The guidance that I'm going to talk you through today is just for here in England. If you're over the border in Wales or Scotland or even Northern Ireland, we've had some international followers as well. Welcome along. I'm only going to talk you through what we're allowing here in England, so please keep that in mind. We do talk to other nations. They are doing their own sort of thing. It's becoming quite fairly similar now, but do keep an eye that this is just for England only. It's really important to download and keep up to date with the latest version of our guidance. The latest version is actually version 4.2. We updated it at the end of last week. It was a very, very small tweak, so small and so insignificant. We didn't bother to tell everybody that we'd updated it, but there is a new version on there. Every now and again, the government asks us to put in stock wording, and this is wording that goes into all the advice that every sector is being asked to supply. It didn't affect the youth sector, but we had to put that wording in, so we did. But download 4.2, go and have a look at that document, and in there is all the stuff you need to know about being COVID secure and nice and safe. And just to reiterate, all the guidance that we provide you is endorsed and supported by Public Health England, Health and Safety Executive, and the Department for Digital Culture, Media and Sport. If there are colleagues from DCMS watching at home as well, thank you so much to those. Number of colleagues there work so hard with us to make sure we get the right package for young people that's responsible and safe, but allowing the sector to do as much as it can within the regulations. We're able to push back. We're able to have conversations with the officials in the Cabinet Office and the Department for Health who drive all this work, and they do listen and they do take on board our thoughts and our concerns, and we've had some significant success. So big thanks to the partnership between government departments and the NYA. So download the latest version of the guidance. It is there to support you. So this is sort of a slide we put together to sort of, I'll try and explain to you what's now in place from the 20th of December. And in one way, it's fairly simple. The rules, if you're not in tier 4, so if you're in tiers 1, 2 or 3, then what you can see on your screen in terms of amber and red for under and over 18s completely applies. It doesn't matter which tier you're in, whether you're in Cornwall at 1 or somewhere in the Midlands in tier 3. If you're under 18, you can operate fairly freely as normal under our amber rules. Drop-in services are fine, open access is fine, that works perfectly well. If you're working in tiers 1, 2 and 3 and you're working with over 18s, again, you can do all the usual things, except that you have to provide a support group, so an invite only. I'm going to walk you through all of that in a moment. What happened when Tier 4 was announced on Saturday, and the challenge this time around is it was announced and then less than 6 hours later it was imposed, it was implemented at, or maybe 8 hours later at midnight. For all Tier Group 4 areas, it doesn't matter which age group, under or over 18, you are now following our red guidance. So I'm going to talk you through the red guidance. And that basically means we can provide support groups, online services, detached youth work, one-to-one support for young people, and we can use our venues. We can meet with young people face-to-face in Tier 4, but it has to be for a specific purpose, to a specific group of young people who've been invited along, and those young people need to be identified by you locally as vulnerable. And we'll cover all of this as we go through this afternoon. So yeah, we now have 4 different tiers. We will update the graphic in the document eventually in the new year. We'll get that sorted. But if you've come here to, if you've just moved into Tier 4, and I live in Berkshire, and I went from Tier 2 to 4 within 48 hours, and we've been getting to grips with what it means for us here. What it means for you is you are red, and therefore for whatever age range you work with, whatever type of activity you're planning, you need to follow our red guidelines. And just remember, from the very first lockdown to this Tier 4 period, we're able to support young people. There was a change from April, May last year to what we were able to do in the November lockdown this year, and we can continue to support young people as long as it's safe. So I'm going to walk you through what this all means. If you've got questions, and if you're not sure, and what often happens is there's some really kind of specific nuances that, very, unusual circumstances you might operate on, or you've got an event coming up, pop it in the chat. We will try and get back to you as soon as, and Abby will be filtering those for you. So let's focus on what we know around the amber. So for under 18s, if you're in tiers 1 to 3, that you can operate online and virtual delivery. So anything online to anybody you wish. Well, keep it safe and appropriate, of course, but online delivery is absolutely fine in amber. Detached and outreach is fine in amber, and you can go out, and I've got a slide later on detached and outreach, and the rules are a little different between amber and red. We can provide one-to-one support for young people indoors under amber. So again, under 18s and tiers 1 to 3, you can provide that support. You can, the big thing with amber that's different to red is that in amber you can open a drop-in provision. So you can say, open the doors at 6:30 and whoever turns up can come in, and you can put them into bubbles of 15 and put them in different groups, and they can crack on and do their activities. You can have more than one bubble if you've got enough space, and the same rules apply as normal. So, for those of you that are still in tiers 1, 2 and 3, that's amazing. And you can provide all these support and services to young people. If you're working with over 18s, however, you're in tiers 1, 2, 3, or now 4, you have to follow the rules for our red readiness. So what this essentially means is very similar in some respects. You can still do online and virtual youth delivery, so you can do anything online and with any young person you wish. There's no restrictions on it needing to be a vulnerable individual. If you can connect and engage them online, go for it, because you absolutely can. We can provide detached and outreach to all young people. And again, with the nature of detached and outreach, you can't control who you're going to bump into, where you're going to go, what you're going to see. So you can work with any young person if you see them out and about. Of course, if you're in a tier 4 area like I am, there's a stay-at-home order, as the government calls it, which means we shouldn't be going out and about as much as normal. But you are allowed to go out and physically active, exercise and things like that. And I think we're being realistic that we can't lock young people up; they will go out and about. So if you're out doing detached and outreach work, then you are welcome to do so in all 4 levels under red for over 18s. If you're doing, you can do one-to-one delivery indoors for over 18s under the red circumstances. And again, you can have other people in the building. You can be doing you can have staff, admin staff, or additional workers. You wouldn't do one-to-one without sort of at least 2 staff in the building, even if you're in a one-to-one space. But we can provide that indoors. And that doesn't particularly have to be pre-arranged or pre-organized, although that would be good practice. We can provide that one-to-one support for young people. And then what's critically different between red and amber, again, is this notion of, rather than a drop-in service, we can provide support groups for vulnerable young people. I've got a slide that's going to talk you through what a support group is and how that works. But the goal of this is to make sure that no young person who needs our support as a sector gets left behind. And I know we're coming up to Christmas break, an awful lot of provision will have closed or slowed down. But if there's a lot of youth work that supports the most vulnerable young people who may still be delivering through this period. And so if you work with vulnerable young people and you're living in a tier 4 area, you can work with those young people as in support groups, no matter what their age. And the other thing with tier 4 and would be the red, so over 18s across the country, as well as all young people in tier 4. This is where drop-in and a triage one-to-one service can be provided. Again, I've got a slide on this, but the goal is that no young person gets left behind. So you can provide a one-to-one drop-in opportunity, and you literally say, for these 2 hours, this day, whenever, we're going to be in the building. If you need support, you can come and knock on the front door, and we'll invite you in and have a chat. And you can do that all day long and support young people. That's absolutely fine. And the goal of this is to identify, should actually some of these young people who may not be part of a support group, who may not have had an automatic invite from you, do you now need to invite those young people in for further support? And that's exactly the point of a triage. It enables you to bring those young people in if need be. So under tier 4, and for all of those over 18 across the country, we can do the following things. So I'm going to walk you through this a bit slower. So again, if you're in tier 4 or you're working with over 18s in tiers 1 to 3, you can do the following. So targeted support groups for young people are permitted indoors. They need to follow the same COVID secure guidelines, which is in the version 4.2 document I was talking about at the beginning of this webinar. And that means you've got to operate, with social distancing, the right hygiene, the right group sizing. All those things have to be in place, but you can therefore open your doors and let those young people in. Attendees need to be what we're loosely calling, I would say, formally invited. So you don't have to send them a letter. You don't have to, don't have to have anything, a bit of paper or anything. You can just text them or tell them, you were invited to come along to tonight's session at 7 o'clock we look forward to seeing you, that is absolutely fine. We're not trying to create an admin role of inviting lots of people, but you can't operate a drop-in service. So it has to be for individuals who you identify who need support, and invite them to come at a date and time to access that support. And those COVID regulations allow for only vulnerable young people, which I think we've managed to, I'm really proud of the fact that we've worked to keep, that there is no firm definition of a vulnerable young person, because each young person is different, each community is different, their circumstances will change. And your young people, not us. So I've said before, we get asked quite a bit, why have we published a list of vulnerabilities, for example? And the truth is we would miss so many young people in that process that we would do them a disservice. And actually what we chose to do is the right thing, I think, which is to say that you as youth workers, volunteers, frontline practitioners, members of your community, whether you're in the Scouts or a youth project, it doesn't matter. You know those young people better than we will. So you decide whether you think they're vulnerable, and keep in touch with them. And if you think that their mental health is deteriorating or they're struggling a bit more, well, then you can invite them into a support group, and you can then meet them face to face. But we've left this very much down to your local judgment, and please use that judgment. And I've said this before. All of us are vulnerable at different times in our lives. Different things happen to us, different situations. Actually being at home for 2 weeks, no school, not being able to see your friends as regularly, that might have a toll on some young people that make them more vulnerable. And therefore you can, if you know that and you recognize that, then invite them to support sessions if you can. That is what we're trying to achieve with this. There's a principle here, support groups should only take place if they really need to. So if you do a project with young people that could go on hold for a while, that isn't necessary for vulnerable young people, then those sessions shouldn't be taking place. And if a young person is going to not need to attend something because they don't need that support in the immediacy, well then, we're trying to minimize the spread of the virus. We've got this new version of it, which doesn't appear to be any more harmful, but it spreads a lot quicker. So the least activity in some respects, the better. But our overriding principle is that all young people who need support should get it if we can provide it. So, therefore, there is no need to not operate. I will just say, and we say this every time, this is simply our guidance. This is what the regulations allow us to do, and our job is to make that available to you to make your own local decisions. We are not compelling anybody to operate. We are not telling you must open your doors. And actually, if you don't feel comfortable, if it doesn't feel safe, or if in consultation with parents and young people, you think actually we're going to wait a couple of weeks, that's perfectly fine. That's absolutely a responsible thing to do. If you can't clean the building quick enough, if you can't open sessions safely, then you have a duty not to, really. And our guidance simply is there to advise you and guide you that if you choose to operate and you want to open, this is how to do it appropriately and safely, and please do. And we'd love you to be open. We really want those. We've seen so much amazing work in 2020 for young people that's adapted and changed, and we want that to continue, and that's why we could keep working on guidance. But we're not telling you or ordering you or instructing you to do anything you don't feel comfortable doing. And actually, if not doing that is the best thing, then please feel confident not to do that. And a key one here is that support groups can open indoors, and you can use your community venues, your church hall, your village hall, your youth centre, scout hut, guide hut, whatever it was. And the law allows you to open those venues, and it allows you to operate your bubbles or your support groups indoors for the provision of providing youth services and support for young people who are vulnerable. So under Tier 4, and again, for all over 18s across the rest of the country, the law allows you to open your building. So people say, "Oh, no, you can't use the village hall." You can, if the landlord or the owner, whoever is responsible for the building, is happy to let you do so. The law is right behind you in saying you can use those facilities to provide support for young people. We want those young people to have that right support. The impact on not providing that support could be very high. And so the law is protecting us in saying, no, actually, for the purposes of this, you can open your youth centres, your scout huts, etc. Please make sure there's the right social distancing in place, all the right hygiene, and make sure it's all COVID secure. Follow the 4.2 version of the guidance. It's all in there in black and white. Hopefully it's very clear, and it's there to help and advise. A few more bits for our Tier 4 areas and our all 18 pluses across the country. Leaders and workers are not included in support group numbers. So when you're calculating your support group or your bubble, you can have 15 young people, plus staff and carers. So if you're running a special needs project and a couple of young people have support workers, they would be in addition to the 15 young people. So you could have, you might have 15 young people, 2 staff and a support worker. That's fine. You're perfectly right to operate under those rules. We often said that if your groups are getting really large because they've got lots of support workers or lots of staff and volunteers, actually our goal is to try and minimize transmission of the virus and to spread. So try and split it into 2 groups if you can, but you can operate up to 15 young people and staff and volunteers, as well as support workers are in addition, which is an important definition. You're only allowed to have 1 bubble at a time inside your venue, regardless of the size. And the word is should. If you've got plenty of space, a really big venue, and separate entrances and separate toilets and all that kind of stuff, then you could operate more than 1 session. But in principle, one support group at a time. You can have other staff members on site at the time. You've got a caretaker or somebody, admin staff or other workers in the office, or if you're in a shared venue and there's an office space somewhere and other people work in that building, that is fine. People can come and go from those spaces, but in your delivery space, it's you and your support group and your bubble and your staff team only, and you'll be fine. Youth sector providers, you can provide back-to-back sessions. So, if there's nothing wrong with providing a session between 6 and 7, you need to then provide plenty of time to clean the building thoroughly. So clean all the door handles, the toilets, all those usual touch points. But then you could operate a session, say that takes you half an hour. You could then operate a session 7:30 to 8:30. You could then have another one after that if you wish. You can have them earlier in the day. We're not telling you when to run your sessions, but we are telling you can run them back to back. But you need to make sure there's ample time in between to thoroughly clean the venue. With the kind of potential increased spread of this new version of the virus, that cleaning needs to be super, super good. If you've been getting it, or just running it around with a bit of a cloth, that ain't going to cut it anymore. You need good disinfectant, make sure you're cleaning it well. I'll come on to some of this in a minute, but you can operate more than 1 session at a, back to back. And I've kind of covered this. You can open community venues for the purposes of providing youth services. That's absolutely fine. The use of private dwellings, again, we've asked this question a few times, is not allowed under any circumstances, wouldn't really be allowed by us under any circumstances in normal times. There is some very specific support for young people who may have anxiety and won't leave their front door, they won't leave their bedroom in some that I've worked in the past, and home visits, etc. normally would be fine. Under Tier 4 and 18 plus, home visits are not permitted, although you could talk to them at the gate because you can be outside with one-on-one. So you could meet them outdoors, you could meet them at the end of their garden, but you can't go in their home full stop, unfortunately. I'm sure there'll be questions on this, there's normally are. I wanted to just quickly touch on the triage supports that we're allowing. And again, as I said before, this is simply a mechanism of saying we don't want any young person not to be able to access the support that they desperately need. And so just because they weren't vulnerable at the point you got down your register list and went, well, who do we need to be inviting in, doesn't mean their circumstances won't change. And so you can provide that one-to-one drop-in opportunity for any young person. And if they come with a friend, unfortunately, they've got to leave their friend outside, but they can come in and have a chat with you. You'll be pragmatic in how to apply that, but provide that opportunity to have a chat with them one-on-one. Make sure you're 2 meters apart. Make sure you've got your face coverings and those usual things in place, and have a conversation with them. And if you just think, actually, I'm concerned about you, well, then you've got every right to invite them to a support group the next week or the next time there is one. Please make sure your safeguarding protocols are in place. Our safeguarding, it must and still is our #1 responsibility. We might have lots of COVID guidance that we're wrestling with, but our safeguarding policies and procedures are your #1 responsibility. You have a duty of care to safeguard young people that overrides most of this stuff. So, but make sure that you're following your safeguarding rules as normal. You haven't got to do anything particularly specifically special. Follow those safeguarding protocols, but you can do that one-to-one with young people. We don't want any young person who is vulnerable to be excluded from support, and that's why we've created this triage route. So you can meet them up, and then you could invite them to tomorrow night's session if you wish. Detached and outreach. This hasn't changed at all from previous guidance. So youth workers can be out and about. We can meet young people in the park, in community spaces. And yes, there's no rule of 6 if you're in tier 4 or over 18s. It's tier 4. Whereas you can be out one-on-one. The world is pragmatic and recognises that there may well be young people who are out in groups larger than one-on-one. And if you come across them, you are welcome to go and engage them. You are covered by the law because you are out there to be a professional or a community member of recognised by us as the national body to go and support and engage those young people. So if you're there to do a job, which that job is to go and engage young people under the employment regulations, you are perfectly welcome to go and engage. And if you bump into a group of 30 young people in the park in a tier 4 area, we've said before, I think we've got a major job to educate young people that this is not acceptable. It's not your job to break them up, spread them out. It's not your job to send them home. Our job is to engage and educate young people, and that's what we should be trying to do. We've got separate guidance around detached youth work in general during COVID-19, working with our partners at the Federation of Detached Youth Work. We caught up with them only yesterday. They're an amazing organisation doing some phenomenal stuff, and follow that guidance. I'll show you what it looks like in a minute. I've got a copy of that, but you can find all that on our website, or you can also find it on their website as well. So a few little additional bits and pieces. Travel. So it is acceptable to travel between the tiers to access support groups. It's also acceptable for staff to travel between tiers if it's for them to go to work and therefore to provide that support. And that applies to tiers 1 to 4 as far as we can see. So if you live, I know if you're in a tier 4 area, the rhetoric at the moment is, stay at home, don't go out, don't travel, don't move into other tier areas. The thing that's really important in that language is unless to go to work. So if you're a worker, you're going to work and you can travel across those borders to do so. And for young people, the regulations allow you to travel across borders to access a support session. And you can provide that transport for them. So that can be a bus, a taxi, in a car or scooter, I don't mind. But young people can travel around to access youth work and to access youth sector support. And workers and volunteers, community members who help you can also do that so that they can provide that support. That's all covered as far as we're aware. Venues can open, I've kind of covered this already. So, you can open those venues perfectly legally and appropriately to provide those sessions. Trips, visits and residentials are not permitted across the country, full stop. Certainly in tier 4, nothing at all. Under amber, you could do some localized visits, but you're going to be keeping that to the absolute bare minimum. And I would be asking myself as a professional youth practitioner at the moment, do I need to be doing this? And in my head, largely the answer will be no. So, trips and visits not permitted under tier 4. All sessions should be pre-planned activities, be aware of what you want to do, but you can still do all the same kind of stuff that you were doing before. There's no types of activities that are excluded. So you can still do sports and cooking and team games and activities, but you've got to be really careful around your hygiene and your social distancing. So keeping people, ideally 2 meters apart, it can be 1 meter plus if they've got face coverings on, and actually not sharing equipment, not sharing utensils and pots and pans or balls or keyboards without them being thoroughly cleaned and disinfected in between people. It is laborious and really testing, but we have really got to be good at this stuff, and we've probably got to up our game a bit with this new variant for a while. Remember, it looks like the vaccines are coming, but for most of the youth sector, particularly young people, those vaccines are going to be a very long way away. So, we've got to be good at this stuff to protect, family members and young people. And here's a point around support groups. Again, they should be kept to a minimum, and the minimum duration, the minimum number of young people in attendance. And if they're not needed, then I guess is, don't provide them. But if young people need that support, then you're welcome to do it, of course. And that's why we're having this webinar for you. Okay, so picking up a few bits around being COVID secure. If you follow these 8 steps, then you will be largely COVID secure. There's far more detail in our guidance document. Please download it, please read it. And if you've not read it for a couple of weeks or a month or so, then download the new version and read it again, because it just reminds yourself of all the details, because there's quite a lot in those documents. So you need to put your action plans in place. If you're in a tier 4 area, you're going to have to definitely go and revisit your action plan, look at the types of activities you're planning, who's got what roles and responsibilities, how you're going to manage the extra cleanliness, hygiene concerns. Be really clear about your action plan. Again, Tier 4, your risk assessments are going to need to be reviewed. Make sure you've got, who is vulnerable, who's clinically vulnerable, should they be coming? Think these things through much, just as well as you were right at the beginning, and have another think about it. Make sure, you've just thought through all the obvious things, and then you're absolutely fine to operate. Bubbles and group sizes, again, just to recap, bubbles can be, groups or bubbles, support groups or a bubble can be up to 15 young people plus staff plus carers. If they're getting too big, split them if you can. One bubble per venue if you're in tier 4. If you've got a massive space, you could operate more than one, but you've got to be really clear that you've got separate entrances, separate toilets, and that the two groups essentially never come into contact with each other. Hygiene needs to be really robust. Washing of hands is great. Sanitizer works, but actually washing hands is almost as better because it breaks down the oil in the virus molecules. Becoming a bit of an expert in viruses, aren't we, this year? So make sure, when everyone arrives, washing your hands, routinely washing hands throughout the session, lots of hand gel if they're touching things, be really, do our best around this stuff. Venues need to be squeaky clean. There probably isn't a parish council hall around the country that isn't looking gleaming by this point, because every door handle, every toilet seat, all this stuff needs to be washed and cleaned regularly and kept. We've got to be keeping this up. So the big risk areas are regular touch points. So the front door as you come through, it isn't automatic, and everyone has to press the same button or the bar to open the doors. Well, everyone's touching it. Everyone could pick up the virus. So regularly wiping that down with alcohol wipes, soap and water, just the same. Bit of cleaner would be great. So keep that going. Face coverings, the rules haven't changed at all. So if you're aged 11 or over, so you've had your 11th birthday, you need to be wearing a face covering. There are some very, very valid exemptions where they wouldn't be required. There are no formal letters or bits of paper or cards. There's lots of stuff on Twitter, or on eBay, etc. They're all fake. None of them are genuine, I don't believe. A few doctor surgeries have issued a few letters, but not much. But yeah, so if they say they don't need to, they've got an exemption, then you can take them at their word. But everybody over 11, this includes workers as well, need to be wearing face coverings. Volunteers, staff, parents when visiting, external contractors. If you've got a DJ coming in to do a workshop, they need to be wearing them. And they need to wear them all the time when indoors. There are some exceptions when you're eating, drinking, or if you're playing a team sport, you could remove them. But if you're just playing a game pool, then that's not a team sport. They should be wearing face coverings whilst doing so. Social distancing. I mean, now, certainly if you're in tier 4, keep as far apart as possible. 2 meters is the ideal, but actually it can be 1 meter plus if you've got face coverings, but we've got to keep that social distancing as best we can. That also sort of applies outdoors as well as indoors. You'll see people when you're outside Tesco's or Sainsbury's or wherever you go shopping, there's the dots on the ground, and they're trying to keep people 2+ meters apart, so 1+ meter apart. So same thing, if you're outdoors, try and keep people apart. And face coverings are not necessarily required outdoors, but if you're operating in close proximity, then you should, why not wear them? And again, if you're 16 and over and it's appropriate, then download the QR code and scan them as you come through, and use the NHS Test and Trace app is what we're recommending. You can find all this information on our website. We published a specific guidance document on Saturday called Tier 4 Red Readiness, and it's your guide to all the things you need to do and think of in Tier 4. It works in tandem with our 4.2 main guidance document. Again, we'll wait to see what happens in the new year. Eventually, we'll try and bring them both back together, but we needed to quickly publish. If you're in Tier 4, follow the red guidance, and we've got a specific document on that. But on our website, you will find links to this webinar. You will find all the documents to download. You'll find some other tools and things to help you. So when you go to our website, on the front page, or as soon as you load, it'll load up a pop-up box that will tell you what the rules are, and you can look at that as a cross-reference. And if you're confused, then read the documentation, and if you really need help, you can get in touch with us. One thing I just want to let everybody know, we are actually, the NYA is closing for the winter Christmas break at the end of today. So if you've got questions we don't cover today, please post them in our guidance inbox, which is guidance@nya.org.uk. And if you post it to us there, we will get to it by the end of today, tomorrow. But after today, we are closed until the 4th of January. Now, don't worry, if the government says we're changing the rules again, or if there are additional things, just like on Saturday, my amazing team swung into action. There were 6 or 7 of us working late on Saturday, getting the new guidance out, setting all this up. We will activate ourselves if we have to, but we're trying to have a good Christmas and let our staff have a rest. It's just like for everybody, it has been one heck of a year. So we will not automatically reply to guidance emails after today, and we will get back to you on the 4th of January. The other thing just to add is we're running another one of these webinars on the 5th of January. So most people are due back on the 4th. The government has said it's going to review the tiers across the whole country on the 30th of December. So what we're planning to do is to see what comes from that. And I will do another one of these webinars with Abby on the 5th of January. And if more areas have gone into tier 4, then there might be other colleagues who want to join us. We're not expecting the rules to change. We're not expecting the tiers, the impact of each tier to change, but we will run a second webinar on the 5th of January at 1 o'clock. So again, if you've had your Christmas break and you've switched off and hats off to you if you've done that, and you come back and go, now what? You can join us again on the 5th to listen to this all over again. So, the government's clear messages around washing our hands, covering face and making space are absolutely critical. And we must all be doing this. I'm not here to do the government's public health job for them. This is just the logic safety thing that we should all be doing to be responsible. So let's make sure everyone's washing their hands, covering their face and making ample space between us. Here's a copy of the guidance that developed with the Federation of Detached Youth Work. You can go onto our website, you'll find that. You can download it and have a look at it, and it'll be there as an additional layer of support for you as you try and do detached youth work. Again, the Youth Work support website developed with key partners is available, and you can go on there and you can find action plan templates, you'll find risk assessment templates, there's tick checklists, there's all sorts of things, plus lots of activities and things you can do with young people, how to do stuff digitally. There's all sorts of fact sheets and information on there, all provided free of charge for you. So youthworksupport.co.uk should be your next destination after this. Before you do that though, just make sure you subscribe to our YouTube channel and click the thumbs up if this has been useful to you. It really helps us with the feedback. So I'm done in terms of the conversation I was planning to have here with you now. So I'm going to stop sharing the slides, and hopefully Abby will join me, and we will go from there.
Hi, Lee.
Hello.
So we had quite a few questions today. Thanks everybody for your engagement. It's the chances are if you've got a question that you need answering, somebody else is looking for the answer to it too. So it really is quite helpful. If we can start with some questions around age groups, Lee, if that's okay. Sure. So we had a question about a young person that's in year 13 at school and turns 18 in January. So what does that mean if you were in tiers 2 or 3? What are they, an under 18 or an over 18? Where would they fit in?
Yeah, so there's a cut-off in the regulations, which is the end of August of this year. So if they were 18 prior to the end of August this year, they're classed as 18 and over. If they were 18 after that date, then they would still be classed as under 18 in terms of the regulations and can continue to access provision. It's a bit of a grey area and an area that we've fed back to the government to make clearer. They may do that in the new year. But the goal is if you're in a year group and you've already been engaged in activities because you're part of a year group, we try and treat you the same. So you should be able to continue to access that project.
Fantastic. So this specific question was a young person that turns 18 in January. Therefore, they would still be able to continue access. If
they turn 18 next January, yes. If they turned 18 last January, no. Fantastic,
thank you. There was another question related to age groups, which was about different tiers. So throughout your presentation, you talked about tier 4 plus 18s and over. Can you just clarify what tier 4 means in relation to age groups, please?
Yeah, so the reason that's the definition's there. So wherever you are in the country, if you want to work with over 18-year-olds, you have to apply to our red guidance. And so, and again, if you're in a tier 4 area, it doesn't matter which age range you want to work with, you have to follow our red guidance, which is why you've kind of got this over 18s plus tier 4, because it's the same rules for everybody in tier 4, no matter what age, and for everybody who's over 18 in the rest of the country. We've tried to avoid putting the whole country into red, because actually providing drop-in provision to young people in tiers 1, 2 and 3 under 18 is the bulk of what the youth sector would do in terms of scouts and guides and activities and youth clubs. So we're trying to keep that as amber as we can. But if you're working with over 18s, it's red, and if you're working in tier 4, no matter what age range, it's red.
Fantastic, thank you. Can we just have a little bit of clarity or reconfirmation around the use of face masks? I know you covered it in your presentation, but there was a question about, might there be any circumstances when in that group work setting a young person could take their mask off? So for example, if you were doing a group activity, the young people were remaining 2 meters apart, but they were struggling to communicate because they were wearing a mask. Would that change anything?
Sadly not, no. I mean, if you're indoors, the rules, the law, it is the law now, requires everybody 11 and over to be wearing a face covering, unless they've got a fair exemption, of course. And it doesn't matter how far apart you are. You could be 3 meters apart, 5 meters apart, you still have to wear a face covering. It is tricky. We really understand that it makes communication much more challenging for young people. But the law does, and I can't advise anything other than what the law of the land states, and the law of the land is really clear that face coverings need to be worn. So you can't, even if you had the Queen's dining room table and you had one person at each end and they were miles apart, they would still have to wear face coverings indoors. And the reason for that is it's about if they move around and go to other parts of the building, people have got them on already and they can't remove them. So they can be removed, but eating and drinking. But again, you should be spaced out 2 meters or so apart. So, you're not sat one-on-one, like, too close. Eating and drinking, and then if you're playing sports, if you're doing a team thing in the sports hall. But again, I think what we've been encouraging the sector to think really carefully about, what types of activities are you doing, and do you need to do those activities if they increase the risk? So a big, 20-a-side football game and lots of lads kicking, huffing and puffing, and they're all kicking the ball and barging each other out the way. Well, that's just a classic way of how you're going to spread the virus. I wouldn't think that's an appropriate activity right now. So are there other ways in which you can engage young people, do activities? We're not saying you can't do those things. It's because we're not here to police the sector. We're just saying that's not a kind of appropriate activities. But you can remove them for those sorts of for sports, for sport activity, eating, drinking, and sport.
Thank you, Lee. Is there somewhere that people could get information about what exemptions might be about face masks? Is that information available?
Yeah, if you go to gov.uk and then / I think it's coronavirus, or if you go into gov.uk on there's the coronavirus hub, and there's a whole section on there around face coverings. And if the government has defined exemptions, then you'll find it on there. I'm not sure, to be honest with you, that they've actually provided a very definitive list. I think they've given you some broad themes, because actually, I know one that comes up a lot is around claustrophobia. And some people can be very claustrophobic, and others, can be fine. And and circumstances change whether you can or can't do it. So I know somebody I know, actually outdoors wearing a mask is not a problem for them. But if they're in a very close confined space, that's where they struggle. Actually, they're trying to avoid going in those confined spaces because that's where they probably need a mask. So, but gov.uk.
Brilliant, thanks, Lee. We had quite an interesting question around youth work in schools. Working on the basis that schools return as anticipated in January. If somebody was delivering youth work sessions in a school with a class bubble, so sizes being therefore quite different, more than 15, etc., with different ages potentially, is that still acceptable, or would they have to use the youth sector group size?
No. So if you're delivering to a class, so there's a difference between using a school as a venue to run a youth club. If you're using the school sports hall to run your youth club activity outside of school hours, then you need to be following probably our guidance. If you're delivering in school as part of the school day to a cohort of pupils in a classroom, then you follow the school's rules and you don't have to follow our guidance at all. So in school, masks aren't particularly, they might be encouraged, but they're not required. They'll be in bigger groups. They'll be in year bubbles potentially. All of that is fine. You just need to make sure you've got the permission of the school leadership to go and do those activities, and they should tell you what they expect you to do in terms of social distancing, safeguarding, and those elements. But yeah, if you're delivering in school as part of school, that comes under the Department of Education's guidance, and you just get the school to tell you what you need to do.
Fantastic, that's really helpful, thank you. And we had quite a few questions around location of where we can deliver. So if we could just go through those, that'd be really helpful. In the current guidance, it's quite clear about the types of venues that you can deliver youth work in, community buildings, etc. But we had a question about a workshop or office environment. If there's no one else present in that environment, so it's being used solely for the purposes of delivering the youth work activity, is that an acceptable venue as long as it's COVID secure and is compliant with all of the practices that need to be in place?
Yeah. So if it was like, I don't know, a local landlord would let you use an office block, just designate it as a community facility for that, for when you're using it. So the law has been changed to allow community venues to open for the purposes of youth sector activity, or support groups. So as includes adults, so alcohol anonymous, all sorts of projects that support vulnerable vulnerable citizens. It doesn't matter what age. The law doesn't define that. So, but actually just opening an office block and allowing people in wouldn't be classed as a community centre. But actually, if you've got sole use of that space, that's for your purposes of delivery or provision, define it, put a bit of paper on the door or something that says this is your youth room or something, and then it would class as a community space. And I think you'd be fine to use that venue. The legislation around the COVID stuff, allows for churches, community halls, and community venues, and the community venue is defined as a youth centre, a scout hut, any kind of community hall or venue. But not a private dwelling or a commercial dwelling in the same way. So you need to define, you need to kind of somehow make really clear that you're using this space as a community space.
Fantastic, thank you. We'll go on to the more tricky one that links to community spaces then, rather than the easy one. So we had somebody comment in the chat who says their local council has actually closed all youth and community buildings and won't reopen them. What can they do about that? Because they now haven't got anywhere to operate their service.
Right, that's tricky, because the local authority has the right to do that, particularly if it's their buildings. And one of the things I'm seeing a lot more of is youth centres are perfect in local communities to be converted into vaccination centres. So I know in some heads of service I've been talking to, they're losing control of their venues for months and months and months while they're turned into vaccination or testing centres. So there's nothing we can do around that. I would talk to your local councillor, talk to your local elected official, maybe contact your MP if necessary. It's a kind of an old-fashioned lobbying exercise. Ask them why they've, ask them for a really clear, description or reason of why they won't open. So if it's that they don't feel they've got the right they haven't got the right hygiene levels because they haven't got enough cleaners or things like that, then work with them to try and see why if that can be overcome. If it's just we're blanketly closing it, then I get a bit pushy and sort of say, hang on a minute, this isn't good enough for young people. You're failing in your duty. You can always pull the trump card, which is there is a legal duty on local authorities to provide support services for young people. It's a weak duty, as we all know, in the youth sector, but 508B of the Education Act does declare that, and actually they need to be opening their venues to achieve that. They might tell it to push off, and there's little you can do about it, to be fair, but there's nothing we can centrally do. I know there's messaging gone out from the local government association, have been great and working with us on this stuff. So they've been sort of pushing the messages and the guidance to local authority chief execs and director of children's services to say, these activities should be going on. You shouldn't be furloughing these workers. They should be at the front line to support young people. That doesn't always get through everywhere. If your venue is being turned into a testing or vaccination centre, you're done. I mean, I wouldn't even try and argue it. I think that's clearly the national priority, and that's what they're going to do, and see what comes next. But yeah, it is really difficult. It's really difficult. And maybe see if you can borrow, speak to the parish council, or see if there's another venue that you can try and move to, or Detached, do it outside. It's a bit difficult when the weather's getting cold and wet, but let's try. One thing I love about our youth sector is it is the most innovative place on the planet when it needs to be. And some of the stuff we saw at the beginning of this COVID-19 in terms of how people transform their delivery, maybe you have a look around and see what others have done and see what you might be able to do to keep in touch with young people.
Some of that information is available on the Youth Work Support website. So if you do have to quickly mobilise to a digital or to a detached, a lot of the stuff that will help you is on that website, risk assessments, templates, etc. So do have a good nosy and get in touch. We might be able to put you in touch with somebody that's doing a similar service. So use the guidance inbox. Okay, thank you for that. We had a question related to a coffee shop. So can one-to-one work still be offered, obviously depending on the situation in the tier, in places like coffee shops?
Yeah, I think that's fine. You know, if the coffee shop is allowed to open for you to sit down and have a drink, then you know, that's perfectly reasonable, isn't it? I mean, there's nothing wrong with that. The guidance allows for one-to-one support. We don't say where that has to take place. So you could do that in a youth centre, in a school, or in a coffee shop. That would be fine. Just be really careful around your hygiene, and you've got to sit fair distance apart, which might make, if it's a noisy coffee shop, might make it a bit more complicated with you know, communication, etc. But no, it's fine, I think.
Okay. That's most of, I think we've covered off all of the questions that were in the chat today. So that's quite good.
Hey.
Is there anything that we haven't covered off that people would like us to? If you just quickly pop it into the chat, then we can make sure that we try and respond to that today. I think we've covered everything though.
Give people a minute or two.
Yeah. What's really nice is people catching up with people that they used to know in the chat is lovely to see.
Excellent.
Yeah.
I think this YouTube method works much better, doesn't it? It allows a lot more people to talk to each other.
Yeah, definitely.
Much improved.
Definitely. Catherine, good luck with your lobbying. Catherine's just talking about her example of her building being closed.
Right.
Yeah, just keep lobbying. Speak to the local COVID resilience committee, speak to your local council, you know, just try and get as many people on side as you possibly can. We'll, you know, hopefully you'll see your way through. Yeah, nothing else is coming in other than lots of lovely festive wishes, and you know,
Brilliant.
so yeah, thank you everybody for your time today.
Thank you, Abby. Thanks for your time and helping us with this. Colleagues, look, this is the end of our year for us. We are, as I said earlier on, we are closing at the end of today. So if you need to send anything, do put it into the guidance inbox, but we will get back to you today. After that, we'll pick it up on the 4th of January. Look, I just want to leave by saying, you know, the youth sector has been amazing through 2020. It's done the most incredible stuff to support young people under the harshest, most complicated situation possible. So from us as an organisation, you know, it's been our joy and, well, I mean, it's been our work, but it's been our pleasure to support the youth sector through this COVID-19 with our guidance, with our advice, with all the, you know, thousands of emails that we've had. You know, try and take a good break. Thank you for everything you're doing for young people. Have as best a Christmas as you can, and you know, whether you're with your loved ones or you're not, you know, I hope you get a break. And 2021 could be an interesting start. I think it'll get better as we go on, as vaccinations kick in, but certainly I think we're going to see more tier 4 areas in the new year, unfortunately. So you know, take the break while you can, and we will be back with you in 2021 with lots of new ideas. We've got some new products, new projects, launching a whole new safeguarding hub to support the sector. So there's more support coming from us in 21. Have a great Christmas, and thank you for joining us.